Hello, I'm Maria Ressa. Welcome to Talk Thursday. Joining us today is Lester Sualog. He's the head of digital and mobile life for market research firm TNS Philippines. TNS Philippines recently released the Mobile Life 2013 survey, which profiled the Filipino smartphone user. Survey shows the Philippines is now considered the fastest growing smartphone market in Southeast Asia, with smartphone sales increasing by 326% in 2012. Sualog will discuss the survey's findings and the insights into what it says about the Filipino consumer today. Thanks for joining us at Rappler, Lester.
Thank you, Marisa. Good afternoon. And thanks for inviting TNS.
Oh, well, tell it. What did you find out in this survey? What were the big points?
Well, there are a lot of interesting things that we have found out this year. In fact, this is our 9th year in doing mobile life. And this year we talked about Metro Manila consumers only, just because we would like to have a specific drill down in this part of the country. So the main findings would include things like we found out that convenience is really big, and this is the main benefit that most of the consumers look after in terms of mobile. The second one is reassurance, that most of the mobile consumers in Metro Manila would like to take out the risk of decision making, and would like to have some help of a friend or probably some apps in their mobile phones.
On lots of other issues, right? So
as well, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Show me first, talk to me about the country though. What stands out about the Philippines in terms of mobile use?
Yeah, so before I answer your question, at TNS Philippines, we actually run a couple of surveys.
Yes.
And Mobile Life is one of those surveys that we look into for Metro Manila.
Okay.
We also discuss about digital, and for a few years already, last year was the most recent one when we did digital life across the country, and we talk about the online behavior as well. We also talk to teens, and we examine their behavior online and offline. But going back to your question,
so you have different surveys that actually give you a full picture of how technology is affecting the Filipino society.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
So what's the picture that you get?
Well, we're trying to catch up with the developed markets, but in our own right, Philippines has its own advantages as well. We are very much social, offline, and that goes into online behavior as well. So in a nutshell, I think the behavior of Filipinos also translate into their online behavior. And what's interesting about that is there are a lot of developments overseas that you see that may not necessarily happen here in the same way that they would happen overseas, but we have our own adaptations.
Could you give me an example?
Yeah. For example, if we look at the circles, we have our own ways of trying, for example, to pass the news, not only in terms of social media, but also we address that through videos or photos, similar to other Asian counterparts. But what we do is, as they said, it's more fun in the Philippines. We insert humor in it, and that's very Filipino that we have noticed as well.
There's several outstanding points about this Filipino market. One is in terms of cell phones. It's more than 100% penetration rate in the Philippines. Is that correct? Of that, when you looked at the smartphone use, if it's 326% growth on smartphone use, iOS though was here and was actually the tool what people wanted for the first adapters. What's the landscape look like now?
Well, our study Mobile Life looks into the behavior in Metro Manila, and I think I could talk about in great depth about Metro Manila first. Metro Manila devices or iOS.
Yes.
We do have a lot of players abroad that are also here.
Right.
And we see, you have the players like Android, for example.
Right.
Or even the Apple. And also the BlackBerry making their own ways into the market.
Which is the preferred device now by consumers?
The device, there are a lot of preference of iOS per type of device. If you talk about smartphones, we see a lot of Android devices out there. It's just because there are a lot of providers as well. A lot of manufacturers carry the iOS, and pretty much functionality also follows. The features they use, the lifestyle that they follow because of the features that they are into. and those kind of things.
And what profile do you get now? I mean, you talked about the first two parts of the findings of Metro Manila, but in general, how would you describe the Filipino today in terms of the devices that they use, in terms of their phones and the technology?
We're pretty much not lagging behind.
Okay.
Definitely not lagging behind, but we have our own ways. We had our own unique ways. For example, Philippines has been flagged down as one of the SMS country, and this translate into instant messaging. So instead of a verbal or call or the voice type of functionality of your smartphone, we do have a lot in terms of text.
Still, until today, even with social media, I mean, we were many years ago the text capital of the world, right? 2 billion.
Yes. And definitely it translates into a lot of functionality, and that's pretty much because of what's available on their handset. So the enablers, for example, the apps that they are subscribed into provide them ways to express themselves, but still through text. But as the technology also gets developed, for example, video and also imaging, you see that this text behavior is also translating into a lot of expressions.
What do you mean by that?
Meaning to say, if we are a tech-savvy country before,
Yes.
given that the technology before was SMS only or MMS,
Yes.
or just the text transaction, transactions now are manifested into several ways. We see also the growth of video, expressions of themselves through video, and that's also a way of expanding the SMS habit. Also, you see instant messaging, and it goes into not only personal but also even business dealings.
Interesting. ComScore in the U.S. In 2010 said that we were the social media capital of the world, and I think we were social media capital of the world until 2012, in which case we weren't anymore. Another country went ahead. And then there was another statistic they had that was interesting, that they said Filipinos upload and download the most number of videos on YouTube, that we're the largest consumer of YouTube. Is that correct? Do you see that in the surveys you've done?
In terms of our scope of the study in Metro Manila, we see a lot of behavior of uploading and downloading videos. But then again, if we look at smartphone behavior, we see that there are barriers in I think the potential is even higher probably, but because maybe connection or probably rates are the two hindrances that I think are very apparent to us.
How did the consumer react to that? So you mentioned connection and costs,
Yeah.
billing. How do the Filipinos adapt to it now?
We are very intuitive in the ways that, in terms of adoption. At the same time, we have the thinking of, we are early adopters in terms of technology. We find ways in terms of trying to get the connection. We either go to public places where Wi-Fi, for example, is available, as well as if you look at manufacturers or service providers, they provide ways wherein they build into their system or their products. For example, the service providers in the Philippines, they have now unlimited services.
Yes.
And all of these would just boost the behavior of, downloading or uploading videos.
Is there a digital divide? I mean, I've heard this said often, and I have my own conclusion of it. But in your surveys, have you seen a digital divide between the economic classes, for example?
I think the digital divide used to be there, but it's fast disappearing. And the manifestation of that, if we go back to the results of our survey in Metro Manila, is that we see that there are a lot of low-cost phones, which means that the access to online, the access to social media is not as difficult as it used to be before.
So what are Filipinos doing on their phones today?
Well, a few things. SMS or instant messaging is one.
Yes.
Listening to music.
Okay.
There's a whole music franchise going on from the service providers and also even from the content providers that they need to look after. Also, there's a demand for videos, email, and also social media. We also see that there are some functionalities that are inherent to the devices, and that include your alarm clock setting and But these are
No one buys
basics.
alarm clocks
Yeah.
anymore. They use their phone,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah. I just want to make sure we have the same terms. iOS for me always means Apple, an Apple product, a browser for the Apple product, and then Android would be a smartphone. Is that correct? I mean, what are the actual definitions to make sure we're on the same page?
Okay. Well, the iOS is like Android.
Yes.
It's an operating system.
Yes. So both of these are just different operating systems.
Yes, different operating systems, different technical structures.
Yes.
So it's the back end of what is the device on your hands would look like, and also there are a lot more. So Nokia has its own. Also, BlackBerry has its own.
So if you look at what Filipinos are using, how would you? I know you had this also in the survey. Which are the preferred for Filipino consumers?
Interestingly, we see that there are a lot of the preference varies depending on a device. Tablet, for example, we see that obviously there are a lot of Android tablets because there are a lot of manufacturers carrying Android.
Yes.
And also there's a demand for it.
And it's cheaper. Is that a major?
Yeah, and it's cheaper.
Okay. And so you said tablets. On phones?
On phones, we see also the same thing.
Androids again.
Androids again.
Yeah.
But I'm not also discounting the fact that aside from smartphones in Metro Manila, we also have feature phones. And these kind of phones can also access the internet, but they may not be able to carry some functionalities, like editing or viewing videos or editing documents, for example. And there are also some basic phones.
We talked again about the digital divide. You said you thought that was decreasing, this digital divide. What does it look like in the future now? When will the time come that the digital divide is closed?
Well, again, I think that's an interesting question, but I think we should go back to the basic needs in terms of mobile consumers. I've alluded to two things at the beginning of the conversation, and the first one is your convenience. That mobile consumers would like to seek for convenience. It used to be that consumers would like to spend time, to save money. They would like to work hard to save money. But now we see a lot of transformation. They'd like to spend money to save time.
Interesting.
And because there's a lot of functionality. And the second one is reassurance. So reassurance is very, I think, one of the most important consumer needs in mobile. Reassurance because most of the consumers now would like to take out the risk in decision making. And that's why the path to purchase, for example, has changed. They'd like to consult a friend, they'd like to call a friend, they'd like to look up an online manufacturer, for example, and refer to those sources of information before they make the decision. So to simplify it, those would be the two things that I think would be big in the future, and service providers and manufacturers of devices would tend to catch up.
Interesting. So you're actually talking, there are disruptive business models that have already taken advantage of this. Waze, for example, which was just bought, right?
Yes.
Crowdsourcing, it tells you exactly, Waze is for the guys who may not know it, but you should get it and download it. But it's interesting because if you're using Waze, it tells you how long it will take to get from one point to where you want to go, and it does it by crowdsourcing the speed, the direction that you're headed. That is revolutionary. It's big data, it's crowdsourcing all at one time. So if you were to do your fearless forecast, what does the future look like?
It's going to be bright, definitely bright, in terms of mobile uptake. Not only globally, but also here in the Philippines. We do have some infrastructure challenges.
Yes.
So the key is to monitor investments against improvements. Investments meaning to say that not only coming from the demand of the society or the Filipinos, but also in terms of the innovation that's taking place coming from manufacturers, coming from the marketing teams, also who think of ways of how to address those two benefits or needs that I've mentioned a while ago.
When you talked about the limiting factors, though, you're talking about the telcos, is that correct?
Yeah, so the telcos, and I think business models are changing as well. So I think there are more variables to it aside from just the telcos.
What about the last question to pull it out is we've been talking about it in terms of private companies and how the businesses will be disrupted. What about possible uses for public service? Do you see what do you see moving forward?
I think there are ways to transform technology in terms of public service. We are also seeing a lot of best practices in other countries, especially with mobile life as we look into developed as well as developed markets. For example, m-commerce or also using your phones as a way to pay off government bills.
Yes.
It's just one of the ideas in which maybe we can address some of our issues in terms of transactions. And
do you see any of this happening now?
It's happening in other countries.
Okay. Mobile banking in the Philippines, has that started to any?
It has started.
Yeah.
There are a lot of providers. But I think in terms of the government space or the public space, I think we can still improve on it, optimize the usage of mobile banking.
Okay. Last thoughts. What from the different surveys that you've done? How would you describe us today and where we're headed?
I think we are living in very dynamic and challenging times, and it's very important for us to monitor and be on guard if, for example, we are a company or even as individuals, to look at these things that are happening and be able to adapt. As Filipinos, actually, we have our own ways of adapting, and I think later on we'll be in the league of those developed markets in our own special way.
Okay. Thank you so much. We've been speaking with Lester Sualog of market research firm TNS Philippines on the profile of the Filipino smartphone user, Metro Manila, but at the same time, basically, what's happening with technology? How is it changing the Filipino today? This is Talk Thursday. Thank you for watching.